What is going on, PWC fans? It is your boy C-Ton, joined by my good buddy Zern. Say hello, Zern. And we are here to bring you the PWC D-League Season 3 post-draft power rankings. So, basically the way this is going to go is I'm going to talk a lot, and I'm going to act like Zern is here because Zern does not have a mic. I will probably alternate between calling him Zern and X, but we're going to start at the team that we ranked 12th, and then we are going to work our way up to the number 1 team that we felt had the strongest draft. So without further ado, let's get into our draft analysis. So right off the bat, we are going to start off in the 12 spot with Tim, coach of the New Jersey Dwebbles. So this team is really interesting. Basically, his team consists of Tapu Fini, Dugtrio, Emboar, Uxie, Rotom-Mow, Zangoose, Goth, Slurpuff, Magnezone, Crustle, and Mega Scizor. So some issues that we have with this team that made us put it at 12 is that Magnezone and Dugtrio, first of all, as both being tier 2, are kind of redundant with one another because Dugtrio traps steel types just as easily as Magnezone does. And having two very high tier mons allocated to doing the exact same thing and having that one thing be pretty easily countered by the item Shed Shell just doesn't really seem worth it to us as analysts. So we have that kind of as kind of an iffy in between. Like, there are other value mons in tier 2 that could have really benefited his team and made the team overall stronger. Another issue that we had with the team was really awkward speed tiers. His speed tiers get obviously really high with Dugtrio, but after Dugtrio, the next highest is Uxie at 95, and Uxie doesn't want to run speed. And then after that comes Zangoose at base 80, I believe it is. At Tapu Fini, I think hits 85. It's just a huge speed gap. So those 100 tier mons don't have to worry about getting outsped by anything unless he is bringing choice scarf users. And I'm totally fine with bulky teams, as you'll see with the further ups in the power rankings, but this bulk doesn't necessarily make sense with the mons around it. Another issue we had is his reliance on Emboar and Zangoose, which Zangoose is a really strong mon, but it can't be your second best wall breaker. Rotom-Mow obviously hits hard, but I don't know. It's a little bit awkward having those two as the strongest. Additionally, as we mentioned with the speed tiers, Zangoose is the second highest offensive mon on his team, and that's a huge speed gap between Zangoose and Dougie. Another issue, not really an issue, because he does have two reliable defoggers in Mega Scizor and Tapu Fini. The biggest issue is that Mega Scizor doesn't like running defog because of how good it is as an offensive mon and the ability to run setup sweep with Sword Stance. And having to bring Tapu Fini every week as defog, albeit being one of the best defoggers in the game, obviously makes your team a little bit more predictable. Another thing that we had on our list is that we felt Rotom-Mow would have been a very strong Z-user choice over the likes of Magnezone especially, because having also Zangoose really, because Zangoose wants the Toxic Orb, but Rotom-Mow having to run Leaf Storm as its primary grass stab, unless you want to run Hidden Power Grass. If you run Bloom Doom on that, you're not losing the 2 stages of Spadef, and then you get 2 Leaf Storms off for absolutely nothing. So that was another thing that we thought was kind of on the fence. But some positives for this team. We feel Slurpuff is going to benefit incredibly from the style of team. Obviously having Goth Trap is really strong, and then having Dugtrio and Magnezone, I think it should be probably limited down to 1 through free agent transactions, but that's up to the coach ultimately. But Slurpuff is going to benefit from getting the very few checks to it taken down by his trappers. And then Slurpuff, I think, is going to run through teams quite frequently with its unburdened belly drum. We think Crustle is a phenomenal tier 5 pickup because it gives the threat of rocks and spikes. to be paired with Uxie as another very reliable stealth rocker. And his team has pretty solid overall natural bulk with Tapu Fini, Uxie, Gothitel's naturally bulky, Crustl's pretty naturally bulky but weak, and then Mega Scizor is obviously incredibly bulky. Yeah, ultimately I think the biggest note for this team is probably dropping Magnezone, because you have a good Steel type in Mega Scizor, you have a good Electric type in Rotom-Mow, and I don't know, Magnezone just doesn't really seem to be fitting the gel of the team. But without further ado, we'll move on to the next team, and it is the Sale Excadrills, coached by GamerB. And his team is rocking Victini, Ferrothorn, Nidoking, Heracross, Sneasel, Frogadier, Suicune, Zapdos, Kofag, Armaldo, and Mega Altaria, as you can clearly see. I don't know why I'm reading that list off for you. So this is a team built around Victini. So one of the things that you want to look for when building around Victini is making sure that we can keep hazards off the field, because Victini is really great at coming in and forcing switches, firing off a V-Create and getting out, or just going straight for the U-turn so it doesn't get trapped by pursuits. With that being said, his only hazard movers are weak to rocks, which is bad for a team built for Victini. Armaldo being a decent Tier 5 spinner, Tier 5 value in Rock and Bug type is really good, but it's not the best spinner. And then Zapdos is obviously an elite defogger, but having to take the 25% from rocks in order to keep your biggest offensive threat, in my opinion, healthy. And then additionally, Mega Altaria needs rocks gone when it wants to come in pre-Mega, because it's taking 25% as well. It just leaves some issues. He has a couple repeated speed tiers. He has 3 Mons at base 95, for example. I guess technically Brogadier I think is base 96 or 97, but like that's not going to change many people's speed creeps. And then additionally, he has 2 Mons at 100, which is 5 points higher. So that's a little bit of an issue for his team, but he has a really cool... Sorry, I'll get into that later. We'll go through the negatives. Again, going back to the rocks, his team does not appreciate it. With the likes of Victini wanting to keep momentum, Sneasel wanting to come in, Zapdos, Mega Altaria, Armaldo even coming in to Rapid Spin takes 25%, and then it can get spin blocked. It could become an issue for his team. For speed, his team is incredibly reliant on Sneasel, which hits 361. I think it's base 115, if I remember correctly. I don't know off the top of my head. And it's also reliant on Dragon Dance Altaria, which, will still be outsped by pretty much any Scarfer that chooses to come. So it's still not the biggest threat for a speed tier. With those being said, he has tremendous natural bulk with Zapdos, Suicune, Kofag, and Ferrothorn. And speaking of Ferrothorn, Ferrothorn gives him 2 really cool things. Ferrothorn can be run offensively, and I think he has a really cool Trick Room mode, which we'll get into. But it also gives him access to Rock Spikes, which is huge. Additionally, he has good Rock Setter in Armaldo and Nidoking as well. Continuing on that, he has really good wall breakers that can make late cleans pretty easy with Victini. Having Nidoking and Heracross as his 2 Tier 3 Mons are both very, very viable, and they both break through teams very well. Yeah, that'll open up the door for potential late game Victini. The other cool thing is he has a lot of Trick Room potential with Kofag and Victini both being able to set up Trick Rooms, and Victini, Ferrothorn, Suicune, Kofag, and Armaldo all being able to abuse that. Even Mega Altaria to an extent, depending on the build. So he was a really cool option of bringing Trick Room teams, so that's something to watch out for as the season goes on. But overall, we have him at the 11th spot. With a few free agent moves, I think that can very easily be jumped up, and he has Mons that can win games on their own. So just because he's 11 on our list doesn't necessarily mean we think he's going to have a bad season. We just think his team has some holes in it. With that being said, we have next up, Nathaniel, coach of the Dallas Staravias. And his team is looking pretty scary, I'm not going to lie. The biggest issue we have with this team is his team is super rock weak, and his only hazard control is Starmie Rapid Spinning. I had this team, well, not this team, but like a similar draft with Kieran Black, Torn T, Jolteon, and Silvally, and I can say from experience that rocks were an absolute pain in the neck. Basically, having reliable hazard removal is absolutely essential for Kyurem to totally shine. Kyurem is still super bulky on its own and can take hits after rocks, but having it come in at full is horrifying for teams. And Torn obviously regains health through U-turn and switching out, but getting 33% back dropped down to getting 8% back is very difficult to keep Torn's longevity. Another issue we had with the team is it lacks natural bulk aside from that Kieran Black. Obviously, I think that can be worked around with this team because he does have Silvally, which can be customized to be a check to most mons. He has a Tornadus that can be run Assault Vest very easily. He has a Mimikyu that gets Disguise, but his mons lack recovery, I guess is what it comes down to. Because aside from Jellicent and Torn T, his walls, I guess Kieran Black gets Roost as well. But like his rock walls can kind of get worn down pretty easily. So that could become an issue. His team could really utilize a Dragon Dancer or a Rock Polish user because that pressure with Silvally is so nice with the parting shot. I think having a mon that can set up in someone's face would be really beneficial to this team. I think Mimikyu can fill that role because it gets access to Shadow Sneak, but his team isn't the fastest outside of Jolteon Starmie. But you can have mons and Tornadus T, I guess, but you can have mons that check those pretty easily. So I think having just like a setup threat could be really beneficial for this team because right now his speed boosting moves are reliant to Z-Hail, and I guess with Jolteon hitting that high speed tier, it doesn't necessarily matter, but it's something to keep in mind. Also, another defog would be pretty good for this team. Another really some good things about this team is, like we mentioned, he has really great cleaning potential with Kieran Black, Mimikyu, and Virizion, which are all his Z-move users. His team whittles down on opponents really well, and having that dual parting shot threat is really beneficial for mons like Kieran Black. And yeah, again, he has parting shot with Persian, Silvally, Torn, and Jolteon. Torn and Jolteon don't get parting shot, but they both get momentum. So I feel like he's going to be in control of most of the matches that he's playing in terms of momentum, and I think that is going to be really beneficial for his team. His speed tiers are very solid, hitting 115 with Starmie, 122 I think it is with Torn T, 115 with Persian again, allowing him some versatility there. Jolteon I think hits 130, Kieran Black hits 95. Really, really diverse. Mega Steelix is a really good fit on this team. It could use probably some Wish support. I think that would be pretty beneficial for Mega Steelix just because of, again, lacking recovery. But really solid team. Another thing I love about this team is the freedom for Silvally. Last season when I had it, Silvally was very limited to what typings it could come because I had a lot of missing types. Whereas on this team, he has total freedom to bring pretty much whatever Silvally he wants, and that's really, really nice. And I'm looking forward to some creative sets from Nate to really make Silvally shine. Sorry, I need some water. So, X, do you have any other thoughts on Nate's team? I couldn't agree with you anymore, buddy. Really great point right there. Next up, we got Jake, coach of the Tacoma Toros, in at the 9 spot. Again, a lot of these teams are still really strong, and I don't want anyone to be taking these really in depth because ultimately, I should have said this at the beginning, but ultimately these lists don't matter. This is just our opinions of these teams. Once they go out and these coaches start playing with these teams, that's when power rankings actually kind of mean something. Because that's showing how you use the team and how the team comes to fruition. And that's something that a lot of coaches kind of get bent up on. But something to keep in mind that like it doesn't necessarily matter. But anyway, going into Jake and the Tacoma Toros, one of the issues that we had with his team is that it is severely weak to physical offense. Donphan obviously is a wall, but outside of that, he doesn't really have anything that's coming in on physical attacks. Toros can run and intimidate, but I mean, it's best used as a sheer force user. Nihiligo, paper thin, physical defense. Primarina, paper thin, physical defense. Mismagius, paper thin, physical defense. Cryogonal, paper thin, physical defense. Thundi T doesn't want to be coming in on attacks. He's going to have a hard time switching in. Jirachi can be run bulky, obviously, but we don't want to, like, that's not something to be reliant on. And if you have only one switch into physical attackers, you can easily double around that, and you can easily take advantage of that by predicting it. So that's something to keep in mind for the future. Another issue is he has 5 mons between base speed 100 and 105, and Cryogonal, Jirachi, Nihiligo, Thundi, and Mismagius. So that's something to keep in mind, just a lot of repeated speed tiers. It's really nice to have those repeated speed tiers in the middle there, though, because obviously you can customize it to outspeed different speeds, but if you have 5 mons in that speed tier, it makes it a little bit easier for a mon like, say, Mega Altaria, if you're going against him, that they don't have to run any speed, and then they can just throw everything into bulk. So having some more diverse little options in there would be nice. His team is pretty rock weak, and he doesn't have defog, which means that Donphan can get spin blocked pretty easily. So that's something to keep in mind, especially with the likes of Rotom Heat. Oh, he also has Cryogonal that can spin, but that also can get spin blocked, obviously. But having the likes of Thundi T, Rotom Heat, Cryogonal is pretty big because they're all such strong mons. Well, not as much Cryogonal, but you want to be able to have them coming in freely. So another thing to keep in mind. One more kind of issue with the team that we have. These are two of the better wall breakers in the game, but he is pretty reliant on Primarina and Pangoro as his wall breakers. We'd like to see a little bit more offensive pressure. He obviously has tremendous late game cleaners that it won't necessarily be the end of the world. But I think having another mon that can just come in and blow a hole in the team is pretty nice. But again, his team is pretty versatile that it can kind of work around that. Another thing I'm noticing as I'm just going through this is it's pretty physically, or especially offensive as well, relying on Pangoro, maybe mixed Sceptile. But anyway, continuing, we're going into the positives. Another issue we kind of had is his team doesn't really have any recovery aside from Wish past Jirachi. Excuse me, I'm going to cough. So, sorry, that was something that I missed in the previous notes. But positives for this team. He has Jirachi Primarina, which is pretty disgusting. That's like a really great combo. Mega Sceptile is a phenomenal fit for this team. It completes both his Fire, Water, Grass core as well as his Fairy, Dragon, Steel core. It also gives him that boosted speed tier that we were kind of talking about, how he has himself a little bit locked up in there. This frees him up a little bit. Another really positive thing is he drafted Pangoro, which usually goes undrafted in PWC, and Pangoro is one of the more underrated Pokemon in my opinion. Biggest thing I think coming out of this is probably grab Defogger, maybe over Cryogonal as tier 5. But I think Thundi T is going to prove to be an absolute monster because of the Z Crystal it gets and access to dual setup. But anyway, moving on to the number 8 team is the Minnesota Hyperfangs, coached by Thunder Numbers. So right off the bat, you're looking at his team, and the way Zern and I were looking at it is that it looks kind of like a semi-stall team, but it looks like a pretty decent semi-stall team. Similar to all semi-stall teams, it gets pretty windled by toxic pretty quickly, and teams with reliable recovery as well will pretty much blow through it. Some of the negatives that we see with this team is that Moltres on this team literally just feels like it's here to complete a fire, water, grass core. And we both are under the notion, like, a lot of people live and die by fire, water, grass cores. X and I are both on the same page in saying that fire, water, grass core and dragon, fairy, steel cores are super overrated because in theory they're fantastic, but once you put them in practice, it doesn't necessarily help. If Moltres was one of the Z users, I feel it's an entirely different story because Z Moltres has the potential to just come in and sweep teams. But I don't know. I just don't necessarily see it fitting with this team. I hope he proves us wrong, but it just feels like it's there just to fill the fire, water, grass core. Another note that we had with the team, we love Mew, but we feel with this team, Mew is going to be forced to run Defog a lot as Stallbreaker Mew. And that's a tremendous set, so I'm not like knocking that at all. It just kind of takes away from the variety of what Mew can do, because Mew can do so many different things, which makes it so scary. We feel the Super Fang set is probably going to be most beneficial for this. Super Fang, Willow, Defog, Roos, just to chip down teams. But yeah, it's one of his Z-Crystal users. If I didn't mention that before, by the way, the off-colored Mons are the Z-Crystal users. Something that we have on here that, again, we hope he proves wrong is Tier 5 Wish Cash just feels like a wasted pick. We don't necessarily think it's going to do anything in the league, and I hope he proves us wrong. I just don't think it's a good Pokemon. And that's a Tier 4 and a Tier 5 that are kind of just wasted. With that being said, he grabbed a different Tier 4 in Rhyperior that is absolutely phenomenal in my eyes and kind of makes up for that Moltres. But yeah, I mean, continuing on, Wishcast can obviously like set up with Dragon Dance and stuff, but it's pretty outclassed in League format. I hope he proves us wrong, but it's not that good of a Mon. This team would really appreciate... It has T-Spikes in Nidoqueen, but it would really appreciate Spike support as well, because T-Spikes can obviously be picked up by opposing poison types. But yeah, working with Tangrowth, Alomomola, Hitmontop, Rhyperior is going to force a lot of defensive switches, even Mew. And forcing defensive switches can get punished by spikes very easily. If you grab up like a spike user and then drop Moltres for Braviary, if Braviary is still available in this league, that could be really scary. Because with his fat team, teams want to get rid of spikes immediately, and you can take advantage of that with Defiant Braviary on Defogs. So that's something to keep in mind as well if you're looking for that. Where was I? He's lacking a little bit of offensive pressure. Like we said, sorry, I just leaned away, so I'll re-say that. But his team's lacking some offensive pressure. He obviously has some late game cleaners that we can get into in a second when we start talking about the positives. But it's going to be a very pivoty game when you play this team. So that's something to keep in mind when prepping, all yada yada yada. His team, as I mentioned at the beginning of the team breakdown, could probably, actually it definitely needs to grab a Heal Beller, because Toxic is going to be an issue for this team as the games go on. Again, obviously Nidoqueen can come in on it, but outside of that, it could be an issue. Another thing I just noticed about the team is that he doesn't have a Steel type, so that could become an issue. Or a Fairy? Yeah, he doesn't have a Fairy either, so Dragon Spam could be an issue for this team, but I think he can play around that pretty easily because he has a Weavile. Rhyperior for physical, just walling. So that shouldn't be too much of an issue, actually. With the positives, again, going back to the semi-stall, he has tremendous bulk. He has a Mew, Tang, Nidoqueen to set up Toxic Spikes, Alomomola, Hitmontop for Intimidate Pressure, and Rhyperior to just sit there and be annoying because of its obnoxious physical defense, and pairing that with Assault Vest Tang Growth is really, really strong. Sorry, Water Brick. So the team is really fat and going to pivot around very, very well. And like I mentioned, it's going to force a lot of defensive switches, and having spike support, rock support is going to be phenomenal. Additionally, the offensive pressure that we kind of said was lacking could be entirely 180'd if he brings the likes of Galvantula and Mega Heracross, because Webb's Mega Heracross is absolutely disgusting. Another good reason to grab Braviary would be for removing the defogs, because, or even Bisharp would be good on this team. So, like, things to keep in mind, Bisharp would take a fair amount of reworking because of points and stuff, but something to take advantage of that. Could use a spin blocker as well, now that I'm looking at it. But, yeah, really, really offensive combo there. Weavile on this team is absolutely phenomenal, because similar to normal stall, once you whittle things down by chipping away with your fat walls, Weavile just comes in, clicks Knockoff with a band, or clicks Icicle Crash with a band, and just cleans out. So Weavile, I'm expecting to get a lot of kills this season based off of the team it's built around. So look forward to seeing that. And Nidoqueen is absolutely essential on this team. I see no reason that Nidoqueen should ever leave this team, and it pretty much seems to be the glue holding it together, especially with access to the Wish Passes from Alomomola. I think that's a very, very potent defensive combo. Yeah, anyway, that's number 8 and the Minnesota Hyper Fangs. Gonna move on to number 7, and number 7 is the Annister City Agrons, coached by the OP Jellicent. So, one of the issues we have, it's not really an issue, it's his personal preference, so like, who are we to say what's different? But I especially feel that having 3 Z Crystals, so before I explain this, our Z Crystal users rule this year is you can have 2 Tier 1 Mons, or you can have 1 Tier 1 Mon, and then 2 lower tiered Mons. So with this team, I think Latios, Entei, and Kyurem would be a much, much better Z Crystal combo. I'm not saying Raikou is a bad Z Crystal user, but giving Entei the Z Crystal especially so it can run Z Bloom Doom, so it's not entirely walled by rock types, and it's not entirely walled by water types. I mean, obviously it gets Iron Head to hit a rock type, but like it still gets walled by it. Its hope is to burn the rock type and not get one shot. But I think having Entei that access, additionally, Z Kyurem is phenomenal. Having used Z Kyurem Black last season, I can tell you it was fantastic. Obviously, Z Kyurem isn't Z Kyurem Black, but it's the same type of Mon. So that was our first thing that we wanted to throw out there. Another issue we have with the team is that the team's offense is very, very rock weak. The exception of Mienshao. Mienshao obviously isn't because of Regenerator and its fighting typing, but for the most part its offense is very rock weak with the likes of Entei, Kyurem, Staraptor, and Leavanny. With that being said, Leavanny doesn't necessarily come in late game as an offensive user, it's primarily a Webs lead. So that part isn't as much of an issue. Another thing we noticed with the team is outside of Lati and Staraptor's immunities, his team is incredibly ground weak. Like, if you run a gravity set against him, he's super weak. If you have an Excadrill, his team is super weak. I mean, obviously only one team can have Excadrill, but once those threats are gone, Latios gets Pursuit Trapped really easily. Staraptor gets worn down by its own recoil very easily. I could see ground types putting a big issue on his team. He has Intimidate Pressure for physical, Earthquakes, and Mega Aggron is so fat that it'll probably live most hits anyway, but that's something to keep in mind. Getting into the positives, his defensive pairings are phenomenal. With Mega Aggron, Lati, and Granbull, especially, that's Dragon Fairy Steel Core, and then having those paired along with Tentacruel and Rhydon is absolutely phenomenal. Rhydon and Tentacruel obviously both being weak to grass, but having Latios and Mega Aggron that both resist that, and then Tentacruel's special defense covering Rhydon's special defense, and Rhydon's defense covering Tentacruel's defense, really beneficial for the team. It also has 2 very reliable Stealth Rockers and a Sticky Web supporter, so hazards are pretty solid for him. With Mega Aggron and Rhydon as the Rock Setters, and Leavanny obviously as Sticky Web. And another thing that we love about his team is the speed variety. Going down the list, it goes 110, 95, 100, 105, I think 65 Granbull, I think 50, 45 Rhydon, I don't know, 115 Raikou, 100 Staraptor, 95 Leavanny, 95 Kyurem, I don't know Leavanny's, and then I don't know Mega Aggrons as well. So sorry, came unprepared, I just kind of rattled those off the top of my head. I think Aggrons is 50 though, or 45 as well, and Leavanny hits 311 if I remember correctly, but I don't know the numbers. Yeah, his team has a solid Volt Torkoran as well, Volt Turn Core in Staraptor, Raikou, and Mienshao, and that's going to pose a lot of pressure, especially being able to switch into wall breakers like Entei and Latios. So that's really beneficial for his team. One of the issues, again, as a lot of the teams are running into, is his team lacks recovery. I think entirely, aside from Mienshao's Regenerator, Latios Synthesis, and Tentacruel's Giga Drain, or Aqua Ring as well, I guess, if you really want to run that. But that's something to keep in mind as well. But with the offensive pressure his team has, I don't think it's going to be that much of an issue. So, top 6. First off, 5 of them are in the same... Actually, this team is in that conference too. So I guess... let me count real quick. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5... 1, 2, 3, 4, 5... 6 of the top 7 are in the one conference, which is pretty wild to me. But anyway, going into the next team, we got the Hidden Valley Dralts, coached by Smeargle. And this is where the list starts getting tough, because all of these teams are really strong. Going to take a quick water break. Thanks for taking over the commentary from me there, X. I'm not saying that the other teams weren't strong, but I feel like these 6 teams really stand out above the remainder of them. And putting all of these teams into categories is so difficult because they're all such different play styles. But anyway, going into Hidden Valley Dralts, his team is fantastic. I absolutely love this team personally. Going through it, first issue that we could see is his team is incredibly susceptible to a Trick Room mode. All of his mons are incredibly fast, with the exception of Volibee and Gigalith. So that's something to keep in mind as he preps. Gardevoir can be run slow. It can also reset Trick Room. But yeah, the rest of his team, aside from, Seismitoad, does not appreciate running slow modes. Another questionable thing, to an extent, is his hazard removal is weak to rock. But with that being said, Crobat and Volibee both get off defogs pretty reliably. And both, Crobat more so can control momentum while getting rid of those defogs. But yeah, that's something to keep in mind for the team. Excadrill also can spin, but with a Gigalith Excadrill combo, you traditionally don't want to be running Rapid Spin. So having the removal being weak to rock could be a little bit of an issue, but I don't necessarily see it being too much of an issue, especially with how well he covered the electric weakness of them. Um, yeah, next up we have his team is lacking a water resist, which is one of the biggest issues we have. He obviously has a Seismitoad, we see that, but when your only water resist is a water immunity that is also quad weak to another mon, it's pretty easy to slap Hidden Power Grass on that mon and just predict the switch. So that's something to keep in mind. Zoroark could be really cool to disguise as Seismitoad, but I guess that's like the only thing I really see it disguising as. Yeah, again, aside from Seismitoad, there's no water resist. I'm not seeing anything super notable that Zoroark wants to disguise itself as. Maybe as Crobat to try to draw in a Psychic. But for the most part, I don't necessarily see Zoroark's beneficial. I think this was his franchise pick, and he was very comfortable with it last season. So I didn't pay attention to much of last season, so I'm very sorry about that. I'm sure he used it very well, and he will prove me wrong, but that's just something that I'm seeing from team makeup. Additionally, I guess maybe Gardevoir, but Gardevoir still baits in like U-turns and stuff, but I don't know. That's just something I noticed. His team is also missing a dragon, which I really don't think is going to affect it much. It's just something that we noted because we don't think it's necessarily going to matter because he has likes of Excadrill, Xurkitree, Crobat, Zoroark, Scolipede, Hawlucha, and Mega Gardevoir that are all huge offensive threats, and most of Dragon's role is to come in and pose the offensive threat to the team. Obviously, it gets resistances for the Fairy Dragon Steel Core, but those really don't matter, and I'm sorry to say that for everyone who lives and dies by those. Anyway, into the positives. His Z-movers are probably the best Z-movers in this league. With Sand, Excadrill, Xurkitree for Z-Rain, Z-Hypnosis, and Scolipede with Speed Boost, Sword Stance, sweeping capabilities. Absolutely phenomenal. Yeah, next up we have some tremendous late draft value. I'm going to double check this real quick. Spoilers for the draft, I guess. Where you at, Smeargle? Yeah, he grabbed... Oh, never mind. I take it back. I was going to say tremendous late value in Sand, but he actually grabbed it pretty early. But still, Sand is phenomenal in Draft League format. Last season in PWC was the only time I've ever seen it not make the playoffs. So shout-outs to you, Gio. I'm just kidding. Another thing we love about his team is the spike support that Frostlass provides. It also provides a rapid spinner, or a spin blocker, excuse me. Sorry, talking for this long is not good for my brain hole. And we also feel that Mega Gardevoir is a phenomenal fit on this team because it has the ability to run no special attack and it will still fill the role that this team needs. It can also allow for Wish Passing, which can provide an additional Sand setup for Gigalith, potentially. It can also bring back some threats that we weren't necessarily expecting. Another thing, if someone does have a strong Trick Room team, Mega Gardevoir can reset that Trick Room if needed. I don't think it's going to ever get to that extreme, but it has that potential. But yeah, another positive that we feel is he had some of the best value picks in the draft. He has Frostlass in Tier 4, which is fantastic. Seismitoad in Tier 4, which fills a role his team desperately needs. Zoroark and Volibee are both tremendous values as well. And then he grabbed Xurkitree and Scolipede with his points. So he used his points very, very well. And I'm excited to see how he plays this team. He has so many different options to break through. His speed tiers are phenomenal. And yeah, I'm excited to see what Smeargle does with this squad. But anyway, moving on from 6 to number 5, we got the Philadelphia Phanpys. So, X, do you mind talking about the Phanpys for a second? couldn't agree with you anymore, buddy. Joel is the coach of the Philadelphia Panthers, and he was the PWC main league relegation. So he's down here looking to work his way back up, and he is in our 5 spot. Sorry, I accidentally scrolled. His team is looking pretty scary, I'm not going to lie. His hazard, one of the biggest issues we have with the team, though, is that his only hazard removal is Serena. Similar to the rest of the league, spin blocks pretty easily. Again, with all of these teams, when I build, I don't really care about hazards. Like, they really get the opportunity to be set up. So again, all of these notes are just on paper notes. If anyone is offended by these lists, I'm sorry. Once the battles start, we'll be able to like defend our points with like objective reasoning. Like, you made a mistake on turn 3, yada yada yada. Yeah, these are just lists, and I'm very sorry if people are offended. I'm just going to get that out of the way again. After this week, I'm not going to care if you're offended, because I'll actually have a reason for it. That these are all pretty objective. But anyway, continuing on, another issue with his team that we saw is his walls get set up on pretty easily, especially with substitutes. Cresselia doesn't have the natural attack to break subs for the most part. Lantern gets subbed on pretty easily. Serena gets subbed on pretty easily. Diancie, depending, could. But Diancie hits, I think, base 100s in attack and special attack, so I don't think that one as much. Yeah, that's an issue that we could see leading to a setup sweep against him. Another thing that we noticed is that his offense is semi-reliant on the dual fighting core. He has tremendous wall breakers to work around that, which we will get into, and I feel like he built around the dual fighting core pretty well, which we will get into, but just a note on the negative side. And my biggest negative with this team, which is going to seem kind of counterintuitive because I have it on my team in PWC main, is that I don't like Lantern. Like, this team has no need for Lantern, in my opinion. I feel like its only role on this squad is Heal Bell. I get that it has Volt Absorb, and I get it has Water Absorb, and they're both tremendous abilities. But he has a Serena to come in on water types. And he has Cresselia that can come in on waters and electrics. I guess electric or Volt Absorb paired with Manaphy is really nice. But I don't know. I just don't necessarily like it on this squad. I think it provides him with a Heal Beller, which is nice, but I think it just provides another mon that can potentially get set up on. So that's another note. You can probably prove me wrong pretty easily with that one because it's just a personal preference. But again, that's just me. Weezing is a phenomenal... Sorry, on to the positives. Weezing is a phenomenal tier 5 pickup with its incredible natural bulk. Diancie, I think, is fantastic because it provides the flying resist that his team desperately needed. He had Metagross, but you don't want to rely on one mon when you have 2 huge threats that are both weak to the same typing. So Diancie got him a second flying resist. His team could be a little fighting weak, but he has a Cresselia, so like that probably won't be too much of an issue. He also has a Serena and Weezing. Never mind, I take that comment back. His offensive pressure is ridiculous. Like, his wall breakers with X-Cloud, Sharpedo, and Manaphy. Sorry, I was trying to find it. It's absolutely ridiculous. And Manaphy isn't usually looked at as a wall breaker, but like, I've been talking to Joel, and I talked to him about how I use Manaphy, and he agrees with the fact that Manaphy is usually best used like mid-game to just break through a team to allow like a late-game Scarfer to clean up, which is what I see Terrakion doing, and I see Mega Lopunny cleaning up pretty well late-game as well. So I think those wall breakers are going to be absolutely huge for Terrakion and Mega Lopunny. Because a Lopunny sitting in the back, you can only have so many physical checks to Mons. And when you're just having Mons getting broken through, you eventually need to get it in there. And that chip damage is all Lopunny needs because of how strong it naturally is. Manaphy is one of the best mons in League format, which is another huge positive just for having it. So shout outs to you for having Manaphy. The ability to Tail Glow, Calm Mind, run Acid Armor, just a really, really versatile mon. Also the Rain. Well, he can't use Z-Rain, but still Rain Rest is really strong. And another thing that we love about the team is Tracheon being paired with Cresselia and Metagross. Like, it doesn't necessarily make sense on paper, like loving that it's paired with 2 Psychics, but like that's pretty much what you need, because Cress and Metagross, neither, especially Cress, appreciate knockoffs or Dark-type moves in general, and throwing that with Tracheon's Resistance and Justified is enough to make teams triple think clicking that Dark-type move. So having that mind game is really strong, and it's just another very, very strong offensive pressure, which is pretty much the theme of this team. A lot of offensive pressure with a couple walls. Teams are going to have a hard time switching into this team. Opponents' teams will have a hard time switching into these wall breakers, which is going to be huge, and that's probably where this team is going to shine, through Exploud and Sharpedo. Anyway, moving on from number 5 to number 4 in the Flint Muddy Waters, coached by Lagoon. This team is, I think, my personal favorite. We struggled. I don't know. I think the issue with his team, I don't know. I feel like we probably should have had him up a little bit, but we have him at 4. His team is a little bit rock weak, and his only ice resist is looking like, I think it's only Rotom Wash. Maybe Ninetales A, but like Ninetales A can't really take hits. But another thing we could see having an issue with this team is electric types. Obviously, being able to run Hidden Power Ice, electric types can run through this team pretty easily, actually. I think he'll get trapped in a couple Volt Turn cores. But yeah. Going on to the positives, his team is going to suffer from 6-Mon syndrome, I feel. We love the Veil offense with Ninetales, Celesteela, and Zardex. Additionally, I love Rotom on this team because Rotom is just so naturally bulky and can pivot very easily, which is really beneficial. Yeah, and also Conk under Veil is pretty scary as well. He grabbed Smeargle in Tier 4, which provides a form of sticky web threat. It can also do a ton of other things. I'm not a big fan of Smeargle personally, but it moving down to Tier 4 will probably be worth it because it's going to force teams to prep for that. Another thing that I personally love, because I drafted in main, is the drafting of Volbeat. Volbeat being able to pass into the likes of Ninetales, Celesteela, Zardex, Rotom, Espeon, all horrifying threats to grab +3s from. Another really strong thing about this team is the natural bulk with Gligar, Rotom, and Muck. His team's lacking some recovery, which maybe will be an issue. Actually, no, it's not even really lacking that much recovery. Just kidding. I take that back. Moving on to number 3. I like this team a lot. We probably should have had this higher, actually. This probably should have been 3, actually. But anyway, moving on. We are going to the Barisha Pichus, I think it is. I don't remember what the city name of this is, but the Pichus, coached by HK Sol. And HK Sol's team is looking scary as heck, too. Again, probably should have swapped these two teams, in my opinion. Now that I'm looking at them again through the list. But some issues we have with the team are the double bulky waters, which could become an issue. We feel Thundy I would probably be better replaced with Thundy T in this one scenario. Any other scenario, Thundy I is better than Thundy T. But his team's looking a little bit electric weak, so that could be an issue. His only default control is through electric weak mons, which is another issue we could see coming into play. He also has Mega Diancie, which is probably one of the main reasons. Mega Diancie plus Volcarona plus Thunderous Incarnate is probably the main reason that we have him up here. Additionally, Celebi is phenomenal in Gen 7. But another issue we had with the team is that Garchomp is one of his Z users, and we feel instead of Garchomp being that Z user, it should have been Thunderous Incarnate because of Thunderous's ability to outspeed, and it has a much more diverse move pool. So we feel Thundee was probably the stronger Z Crystal user. But the positives, he has tremendous hazard control paired with Z Volcarona, which on its own is absolutely horrifying. That just wins games on its own. He has really good rock setters in Cobalion, Empoleon, Kecleon, Mega Diancie. Mega Diancie usually doesn't want to run rocks, but it can if it needs to. Garbodor is a tremendous value in Tier 5, grabbing spikes and T-spikes, so that's really, really strong. And one of the big things that he does really well is he covers a lot of his weaknesses, with the exception of, I guess, the electric weakness. But grabbing those dual steals is really beneficial for his team. So that way, having the likes of Garchomp doesn't make him susceptible to fairies. It also doesn't make him susceptible to ice because he does have those dual waters. So you can tell this team was built primarily around Garchomp. Thundee was probably the better Z Crystal user choice in my opinion because Garchomp likes Scarfs, Garchomp likes Rocky Helmets, whereas Thundee usually runs Life Orb. But anyway, moving on from number 3 on to number 2. Coming down to the end of it, we got the Sacramento Nido Kings, coached by It's Whatever, aka It's, and his team is looking nice. Real nice. One of the issues we had with it is he could use a mon between base speeds 100 and 95 because his speed tiers are really diverse outside of that. Just missing a little bit in that mid tier to kind of force some different speeds. Infernape and Greninja are both very fast, but primarily you don't necessarily need to adjust speeds too much for that. And Lando T, setting up Dual Dance, you're not going to try to outspeed that. Golbat is the only remover on this team, which was the only other negative that we could really look through. But this team literally could care less about hazards being up. The only mon that gets affected by it is the Golbat that would remove it. Obviously, everything takes 12% or 6%, but that's not too major. But yeah, going into the positives, X, do you mind talking about the positives for a second? Dude, you were just hitting the nail on the head today. I couldn't agree with you anymore with how good Landorus Therian is. Landorus Therian, with the introduction of Z Crystals, somehow managed to get even better than it was in Gen 6. Having the ability to run Swords Dance, Rock Polish with Blinding of Z, Continental Crush, Tectonic Rage, absolutely disgusting, and I feel bad for teams that prep for it, aside from mine and main, because I have, dual ice shards. But, I mean, teams have fun. Eat your hearts out. Because Lando is, again, just an absolute monster. Especially paired with this team. Because it's paired with a defensive core of Chestnut, Milotic, Golbat, and Bronzong. Milotic and Bronzong, specifically, being able to eat up those Ice-type hits. Milotic even eats up Freeze Dries, so I'm not at all concerned about that. Pairing those 4 defensive mons up with Sylveon, that gives you Wish Pass, and then that Wish Pass being able to, I guess an issue with it could be Milotic and Chestnut being a little, never mind, I'm not even going to say that, that's a silly thought. He has Puke the God, just in case something gets out of hand. If something starts setting up, he has the ability to just stop in its tracks with Pyukumuku, with either innards out or unaware. Both sets very, very strong. Speaking of, Pyukumuku is one of his Z users, which I absolutely love because it stops it from getting taunted. Well, it doesn't stop it from getting taunted, but it can still use moves while taunted, while it's a Z crystal user. So really innovative use of its it's really creatively used his Z crystals. Wow, it took me a while to say that. Another thing about this team is Mega Ampharos as his Mega. And you don't really see Mega Ampharos drafted too often, but I feel Mega Ampharos is incredibly underrated as a Mega. It also fits this team very, very well. I don't know if he built around Mega Ampharos or we just saw, oh, Mega Ampharos will fit this team well, but whichever he decided to do, Mega Ampharos is great for this team. Having agility setups is going to be really, really beneficial for him. It also gives him a Mold Breaker Mon. Not that Ampharos really takes too much advantage of that, but it can come in handy. Pile of Swine is one of the best value Tier 5 Mons in Draft League format. I don't really suspect it staying there next season, so congratulations on grabbing that. But he also has Spike support in Greninja and Chestnut, so that's really beneficial for his team. Overall, really strong team, and I'm looking forward to seeing it pull this team out and just kind of run through some squads. And lastly, we got our number one team, and that is the Geo is 12 Flagons, coached by ABP. Not only do they have probably the best name / logo in the league, I feel it is the best draft. The only negatives we could find with this squad is the hazard removal is Komala, and some of the builds that he has could be fighting weak, maybe. He has tremendous fighting resists, but depending on the team he's playing, he might have a fighting weak squad-ish, but yeah, this team is absolutely disgusting. I would not want to prep for it, especially the defensive core being Slowbro, Shaman, Umbreon, Registeel. Yeah, not a fun squad to prep for. Drapion as well is pretty naturally bulky, giving him access to T-Spikes as well to wear down teams. Throw Gliscor into the mix, why not? Toxic Orb, Gliscor is... it's totally fine. Komala, Wish Passing. I don't think Komala is going to come to many games. But the Wish Pass support is benefited as well. Umbreon fills that role as well. Regenerator Mon in Slowbro. This defensive core is so absolutely disgusting to try to break through. Drapion bringing toxic spikes to games is ridiculous with how fat his team is. And then take all that fatness and throw Darmanitan, Mega Gallade, and Tapu Koko in as offense. Like, as if the team wasn't disgusting, throw on a Scarf Darmanitan and just break through a Mon that you have an issue with. Mega Gallade, probably the top 3 Megas since Gen 7 speed buff. And then the best Tapu Koko, just absolutely ridiculous teams. Tapu Koko, I think, is going to clean... Tapu Koko and Mega Gallade are going to clean up so many games at the end, just taking out kills. I don't see this, I guess, depending on how his opponent plays, I don't see this team necessarily winning by big margins every week, but I think that this disgustingly fat core is probably going to get him top 3 records. Additionally, AVP is a really strong coach. I haven't really talked about coaches because I don't really know how a lot of them play. Also, spoiler alert, AVP has already played his battle, as you can see on the screen. Unfortunately, he has his screen locked, so I cannot remove that from the screen. So AVP is 1-0 +1. Doesn't really change anything how I feel about it. We had all of our notes written before this draft, before this battle happened. So I'm just reading from the notes and kind of making stuff up as we go for additional, additional analysis. Dun 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 dun. Another thing is he has a Gorbis, so I don't think Gorbis personally will ever get the Shell Smash sweep, but my good colleague Zern, do you want to talk about how you feel about Gorbis? Oh yeah, tremendous insight. X thinks Gorbis is a positive on this team and will get at least one Shell Smash sweep. So ABP, you got yourself a challenge. But with that being said, that is going to wrap up our PWC D-League Power Rankings. If you have any questions, comments, feel free to leave them in the comment section down below. Make sure you slap that like button if you made it all the way through this long, drawn-out analysis. And yeah, until next week, peace out, PWC fans.